And welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashio, and I am joined by one of my best friends and the host of You've Never Seen, a great little YouTube series about films that, well, I've seen them, so he doesn't know what he's talking about, Father Malone.
Hey there, how are you? Yes, and you know what? Within minutes of posting my latest video, I received not one, but two, yeah, I've seen this, comments.
Thanks for the view, asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are continuing Body Horror July with a look at Larry Cohen's The Stuff.
Warning. We interrupt this presentation with the following urgent message regarding The Stuff. If you see it in stores, call the police. If you have it in your home, don't touch it. Get out. The Stuff is a product of nature, a deadly living organism. It is addictive and destructive. It can overcome your mind and take over your body. And nothing can stop it.
Are you prepared to say on the air that you've actually seen people devoured by the stuff?
Tonight, America is in grave danger.
It's gonna kill you! It's gonna kill you all!
The Stuff. You have been warned.
So the film is directed by Larry Cohen, written by Larry Cohen. It stars Michael Moriarty, Andrea Marcovici, Garrett Morris, and the always fantastic, always stoic, somehow I almost didn't recognize him to begin with, Mr. Paul Sorvino.
Ah, Paul Sorvino.
He's fantastic. And the film is about a delicious, mysterious goo that comes out from the center of the earth and turns people into zombies. It is a satirical film at its core. I think that reading some interviews with Larry Cohen, that's why he said the film was not as successful as it might have been otherwise due to the marketing. However, Father Malone, I am curious, what did you think of rewatching the stuff? Because I'm assuming you've seen it before.
I saw it in the theater as a kid, actually. And I loved it as a kid. I still like it now. I think there's a lot to recommend the film. Rewatching it with a bit of a more critical eye, I would agree 100% with Mr. Cohen that if you're making a satirical horror movie, you have to make it a horror movie first. And I don't think he approached it that way. He made it more a satire of corporate culture and consumerism and the sort of unbridled lust for food we know is going to kill us, but we can't stop eating anyway. And that's all good and great, but you can make a consumerist horror movie and still make it scary, because Romero had done that just a few years beforehand when he made Dawn of the Dead. So overall, I like the movie. I think the performances are really good throughout, and I liked I like some of the effects, even as handmade and as sort of corny as they could be at times. I did like it. I do think it suffers not only from the sort of leaning in toward the satirical portion of it, but he makes lots of weird left turns throughout the entire film that sort of come out of nowhere. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of typical of Larry Cohen, so I can't really fault him all that much. Nevertheless, it could have been a really great movie, and it comes off as pretty good.
So this was the first time I'd ever seen it. This came as a suggestion from another one of my really good friends, Jess Byard, who's been on here a couple times now, and it's fun. It's interesting. It's like you said, the performances are pretty good. Michael Moriarty is a good leading man. He carries the film really well. There seems to be, and again, having done, the prerequisite amount of research necessary to do a podcast the right way, there was stuff that was cut from the film, and it sure feels like it. Actually, it really feels like it. And
yeah, it's my understanding like a half an hour is missing from this movie.
And it feels like it because it almost seems like the characters are teleporting around, especially in the later half of the film, where the film essentially wraps up in the span of like 10 minutes. So Which is unfortunate because you don't get enough of Paul Sorvino's character, and you don't get enough of kind of the wrap up of the film. But other than that, I think it's a fairly interesting film. It is, if it's going to be satire, a horror satire, it needs to be horror first, and it's just not very horror, like, at all.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff is pretty horrific, but you never really feel like the characters are all in that much danger, and that could have been a solution right there if he had introduced more characters early on and then having them kind of become part of these stuffies. Awful word.
What a dumb name.
Yeah, man, just really bad. And it's a weird opening scene, just with this like old man at a quarry, just seeing this white ooze bubbling up from the earth and immediately tasting it. That was. I almost wish the movie had just begun with the stuff on sale and nobody sort of questioning what it is, just gobbling it down. Like I
think it would have been a better reveal.
I think that was actually a wrong move on his part, showing us where it came from.
It would have been a better reveal, right?
Yeah.
Like, they come into the quarry and you see this like giant bubbling pit of white goop, and I think that would have been a better reveal for where the stuff came from.
Absolutely, because we want to find things out with our lead characters.
Well, and also you want to. I just have a hard time believing that, like, there's just some guy dipping his finger into this goop on the ground and being like, "Oh, this tastes good." Like, the fuck does this? Like, what the fuck is going on all of a sudden?
Super unusual.
Right. But again, I mean, look, here's the thing, and I'm not going to mince any words. This is the first Larry Cohen film I've ever seen. So...
Oh, my...
I am not familiar with him as much as I probably should be. I have seen films that he has written, like the American cinema classic Cellular, which he did the story for, which I actually like Cellular. I think it's actually a pretty fun movie. But in regards to films...
I like that movie a lot.
Yeah, it's fun, and Colin Farrell is really good in it. But
no, that's not Cellular. That's Phone Booth.
Isn't that the same thing?
No, he wrote both.
He wrote both, yeah. Actually,
Cellular is with Chris Evans and Kim Basinger.
And Statham. Jay Statham.
Yeah, Jason Statham as the villain.
Jason Statham, as they might even say. Yeah, that's right. So I always get those two confused, but guess what? For me, I've seen them both, and Larry Cohen actually wrote both of them. So
he did.
So I actually am right and wrong somehow at the same time, so that's fun.
One of those really weird coincidences.
Yeah, but I like Cellular. I remember enjoying it when I watched it. Doesn't William H. Macy in it, too, as like a cop?
He sure is. He's real good in it, too.
And look, Phone Booth is a lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
It's, it's got Kiefer Sutherland as the menacing voice. Colin Farrell is kind of the dickhead who gets his comeuppance. And is it Forrest Whitaker as well, right?
Yeah, man. It's
perfectly
who
fun
directed
movie.
that? It was Joel Schumacher, I think.
Yeah, shocking. Joel Schumacher.
I know, one of his better outings.
Yeah. But the thing with Larry Cohen is this is my first film I've seen that he's directed. So... I didn't know what to expect.
He's a better writer than a director.
Okay.
Clearly, he does not know how to direct action, because the action sequences in this movie are garbage. I'm thinking specifically of when Michael Moriarty and Chocolate Chip Charlie Garrett Morris are escaping like four thugs who are chasing them, and it's just so... lockdown camera, we're getting into a boat, there seems to be no menace at all. Like, I don't know, that scene in particular, I was just like, what is going on here? Like, did they not have enough time?
Well, again, I don't know if that was some of the stuff that got cut out or not, but yeah, the action, quote-unquote action scenes are real bad. And look, like this, I'm not sure that this film really needed it, but when you see how bad they are, it's almost like I wish it didn't have it to begin with.
Yeah, speaking of which, not to jump right to the end here or anything, but the sort of recording studio showdown is a green screen nightmare.
Oh dear God, it's so bad. It is
where they go so far as to not even have glass in the window. It's just an effect while he's pretending to break it in, and then when he steps in with the cut up wires to like burn the stuff. Like, it's clear he's on a set, like on a green screen set, and they've just superimposed him. I was just like, wow. Because a lot of the effects in the movie, like, are really good, I think, where they use, like, a revolving room to have the stuff, like, moving up the walls and everything. That's always a great effect. And lots of little cool things like that, but the end is just unforgivable.
Yeah, and that for me is the issue that I have with the stuff, is that it's such a poorly paced film that it almost undoes all the good that the premise has just on its own. Because it is an interesting premise, and it's a fun premise. I'll tell you what, it almost feels like it would be better suited as like a Twilight Zone episode, because you could really trim it down and get it lean and into something that would be a lot better as a serialized, not a serialized, but like a standalone episode of a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, as spot on as the advertising is, because this is also a comment on advertising this film, as good as those ads are and very site-specific to around 1985, like I could have easily seen any of those ads running on television at the time.
Vigoda.
Oh, yeah, exactly. As good as they are, there's like too much of them. This movie's an hour and a half. I'd say at least a third of this movie is advertising for the stuff.
Well, yeah, and that's, again, that just comes back to the pacing. I mean, you have a film like RoboCop that uses those ads as kind of a way to break up the action, but not in a way that feels intrusive. And then when it's this, it's like, let's look at this TV now. Like, wait, what? Like, the fuck?
Yeah, the
You're
cutaways
really
are
destroying the
unmotivated
pacing of the film.
Now, having said that, Michael Moriarty is fantastic in this movie.
Oh, yeah, he's great. And Garrett Morris is great. I didn't understand, like, again, it feels like there's a scene missing with where Garrett Morris's character becomes a Stuffy.
Yeah, I mean, he, supposedly, I assume it's when they're in the diner together and they decide to split up and he's going down to Washington. We don't see him get captured. And then he shows sort of back up unbidden. So that kind of makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that he is a famous Amos karate expert who is there to do battle with the stuff. It's like, it's one of the left turns in this movie that I'm just like, where did that come from? Which can be fine. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need a through line, as straight as an arrow necessarily. Like, I like left turns in films, but he kind of comes out of nowhere, which is not, as you said, like, he's great in it. So I'm not trying to take anything away from Garrett Morris. I always love seeing him. But, that character appearance and then suddenly, like, karateing, I don't know, man. It's so unusual, which maybe makes me like the movie more. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing that I do like is that Garrett Morris character. I mean, it is weird, but at the same time, I really like it. But I also like Garrett Morris. Like, it's, he's not hard to like. We just saw him in that episode of The Twilight Zone, and that he was great in that as well. So,
yeah.
This is the weird thing about this movie. It almost feels like two different movies, like, competing at the same time.
Yeah, because the idea of a corporate saboteur, like, I don't think I've ever seen that in a film. And when Michael Moriarty shows up and they're hiring him to do this job to, like, go find out what the stuff is, like that in and of itself would be a really good movie. And there's also a good movie to be made about advertising, and there's also a good movie to be made about how the FDA just puts garbage through at a price so that we can consume it and not question what's going on. So there's actually like 3 or 4 movies in here. Spike Lee always used to say that, like, because he got criticism for putting too much plot or too many characters in his movies. And he always said, like, I would rather have too much than not enough in a movie. And I can totally get behind that, but everything has to coalesce. This feels like here's a part of a movie, and now here's another part of a movie, and then at the end it turns into an Invaders from Mars sort of situation.
Oh, yeah, and look, as much as I like Paul Sorvino in the film, he feels completely unnecessary. He seems like he came in from another movie. Like, really feels like he came in from another movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a comment on what at the time I think was the Birch Society, like right-wing yahoos who were, preparing for whatever war was coming, the New World Order and such. I mean, they're still around, obviously.
I was going to say, that sounds like now.
Yeah, of course. I mean, those yahoos have never gone away. And I think it's an interesting concept to have them be the heroes, as far as, more satire upon satire. But, it does come down to pacing, because just like when Garrett Morris just sort of shows up unbidden, so do these guys, really. And it wouldn't have been that hard, because clearly this guy owns radio stations and is out there broadcasting. To have him peppered through the film with, if they're going to show us so many ads for the stuff, like have it go like that's the end of the stuff commercial, and now back to this Yahoo like ranting on television. and then it wouldn't be so jarring when he just sort of suddenly shows up.
Yeah, I honestly think that you're onto something. That would have been a better way of doing this, right?
I think so. I mean, it's fine to have characters who just sort of show up in the final act. That's fine, but we have to have some sort of basis for their being there, right. And particularly when it's a comment on media in general, and the guy uses the media, like, just throw him in early, like, you know. Kind of unusual that it doesn't. Well,
and look, here's the thing, and I think that this is something that's maybe more common with some of these 80s body horror films, is they seem to be, especially with something like Street Trash, Society, the stuff, it seems like it's a thinly assembled plot around a couple cool effects. And this film definitely feels like it. Street Trash really feels like it.
Street Trash is 100% based on what can we do with these visual effects.
Right. Which is fine. I mean, look, there's something to be said for really well done practical effects, but at the same time, that does not support a movie in and of itself. Same with Society, and I know people like Brian using Society a lot. I feel the same way about it, where it's like, there are some cool effects, but the story is essentially being propped up by the effects, and there aren't enough effects to really prop up the story.
Yeah, I mean, in Society in particular, like, that was all over Fangoria magazine before it came out, and, I went to see it, and it was just... Yeah, I mean, the effects are great, sure, but, it's not as clever as it thinks it is. I think this film is as clever as it wants to be, but it doesn't hang together.
Oh, no, I mean, I will say that this film is better than Street Trash, and it is
much better.
Yeah, well, look, as much as I like Street Trash, because that was essentially the first body horror film I ever saw, because I remember walking through the aisles at a movie trading co. right before I went to college and seeing the box for the re-release for it and being like, holy shit, this looks fucking nuts, I'm gonna buy this and watch it. And it is nuts, but also, it's fucking boring. And
yeah,
it is actually, like, really boring, and it is so... There's nothing. Okay, look, you could go watch the best scenes from Street Trash on YouTube, and you will get as much out of that film, and you'll save yourself an hour and a half or however long the film is. I actually haven't seen it in a while. And same with Society. You can see the crazy parts of Society without having to go see the film. And with this film, like you said, I think there's enough to really keep you interested, but it's so hodgepodge that while you're interested and you're kind of kept along with the film, they really did such a poor job of pacing that they really don't do as good a job as they could making a film that's cohesive. And that's a huge bummer.
Plus, they picked the wrong Bloom brother to focus on.
To what?
To focus on, like, the lead kid is...
right.
His older brother, Brian, is a really good actor, and his younger brother, not so much. I mean, he's okay.
Yeah, no, oh god, yeah. Scott Bloom is really not great.
No, I mean, he weighs the movie down.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing about this movie that's really weird is there's like that, it's like a subplot with the kid who just happens to see the stuff moving.
Yeah, and if the stuff is constantly like this is gonna get into like sci-fi, like suspension of disbelief kind of things, like. At one point, his family wants him to eat it because clearly they've all been taken over by it and they want him to be one of them. So he goes up to the bathroom and dumps it into the toilet and then fills the cup with shaving foam so he can pretend that he's eating it. But when he dumps the stuff into the toilet, the stuff immediately comes to life to like try and save its own skin. And is that the first time it's happened? Nobody's ever tried to just dump it, like, or throw it. You know what I mean? Like, I can't fathom with the amount of stuff being sold where they now have their own stands, like ice cream stands, that no one has seen it do this before.
Well, maybe they just don't care. And maybe that's the whole point.
Or maybe they've already been taken over. I don't know. But it just seems a little happenstance, a little convenient that it's just this one kid.
And I guess we're led to believe that if you eat it once, you become taken over?
It must be, because the guys at the end do not want to eat even one bite of it.
The thing at the end I thought it was okay. Again, doesn't feel like much of a payoff.
No, it doesn't, and this movie has more endings than the Return of the King.
Oh, right?
It just kind of keeps ending.
There's like the ending with the female character played by Andrea Maravici. There's the ending with Michael Moriarty. Then there's like a sub-ending with black market stuff sellers, and then there's another post-credits ending. Like, Jesus, good lord.
Yeah, like... this movie did not support this many endings. Like, it feels weirdly like a novel. Like, it should have been a book. Like, then all of these weird left turns would be okay. Like, suddenly we're going to jump to a new chapter with a whole new bunch of characters also dealing with the stuff. Like, I don't know. It doesn't hang together as a 2-hour movie, and it's not even a 2-hour movie. So, I mean, I would be curious to see a director's cut of it, to see what got cut out of it. But my fear is that it's more characterization and more satire and less stuff. Like, I mean, he himself said,
less stuff, huh?
Yeah. New World, wanted it to be more of a straight-ahead horror movie, and that's what they tried to cut it into. And if that's what they did, and it's still not a horror movie, then I can only imagine adding another half hour of corporate intrigue was not going to aid the film in any way.
Well, and the other thing is if you look at, there's 2 releases of the film you can watch. There's the 87-minute initial box office release, and then there's a 93-minute Blu-ray. So I don't think you're ever going to get the 30 extra minutes. But I do think you're right. I think it's probably just unnecessary character stuff that ends up going nowhere. And if it's more stuff with Scott Bloom, I have no interest.
Yeah, I'm good without it.
But again, it does kind of check some of the boxes for me for this month. It has body horror. It's not entirely without merit.
No, I you know what? I'm not going to not recommend the movie.
It has a good look.
I liked it then. I like it now.
Good.
I think it's an interesting little film. Like, it is a hodgepodge of a bunch of different genres, and that's fine. There are worse ways to spend 90 minutes than watching this stuff. A lot of the movie is a lot of fun, and I do think there is a lot to recommend it. Maybe not the heroic music. Good Lord.
Well, yeah, no.
Dun, 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 dun. It was just like, oh, stop that. But overall, like, I think it's worthy. I think it's not his best film. That's probably It's Alive. That's a little more succinct with the horror and then the commentary sort of layered underneath it. This seems like there's no subtext in this movie. It's all text, and that's a problem. Which is weird because, he's been writing since the early 60s, like, on television for, more than a decade. He created the show Branded, wrote the bulk of the series, dude. Bulk of the series.
Well, and with this film, it has everything I was hoping it would have. But like you said, I think you're probably right when it comes to he's a better writer than director.
Definitely. I think there were probably a dozen filmmakers out there at the time who could have taken the material and shaped it a little bit more. And even if they didn't change what was on the page, then they would have made the sequences much more horrific. And that's ultimately what's lacking in the movie. For a horror movie, you got to be scary first.
It's too jokey. Like, even the death scenes are a little jokey for me.
Yeah.
They're played way too much for laughs.
Yeah, I agree. And, and he was coming at it from a comedy perspective, but, like, that's not the fault of anyone but his.
Well, and even when something like Garrett Morris's head is, like, essentially opening up and the stuff is flying out of his mouth, like, that should be really played up for how awful it is, because it is awful.
Yeah.
It's really gross.
Like, I said before, like, I really like the effect when they're in the motel room and they've lit the stuff on fire and it's, like, running up the walls. Like, I think that's a beautiful shot, but they, like, repeat it, like, 20 times. It's clear that they shot it from a dozen different angles, and they just keep showing us the different angles. It's not like anything new is happening in that room. Also, how flammable is the stuff? Now, like, let's put aside for 1 second the idea that nobody has thrown it in a toilet or tried to flush it down a sink. Like, nobody has, like, dropped a cigarette on this stuff. Like, it is very combustible.
But it tastes good. Tastes delicious.
Well, as long as it tastes good. I mean, ultimately, that's his point. Like, he's saying that, Americans in particular, like, we know this shit is bad for us, whatever we're eating. This is just the sort of ramped up version of that, where this is actually taking us over, but we don't care because it is so delicious.
Because it is marshmallow fluff. And everybody knows that marshmallow fluff on peanut butter sandwiches is the best.
Oof.
Oof.
No.
Isn't that awful? Isn't that something that's
awful?
Just, it's mushy with mushy. And then, because that's all I could think of when I was watching the film is like, that's just marshmallow fluff that they're eating. Or something.
Yeah, or like Cool Whip, like, imagine just eating a spoonful of Cool Whip over and over again. Like, maybe the first bite would be like, it's pretty good. And then after a little while, you'd be like, what the fuck? But maybe by the third bite, it's already in you.
It's already taken you over. with the magic of the stuff. I'll tell you what, again, the film looks nice. It's got definitely has that 85 feel to it. The design of the containers of the stuff is great. The look of stuff is great. I would say it's rather iconic. But yeah, it's just, there's so much good, and then, there's so much good, but then all of a sudden it just wants to, it feels like it's just doing its best to screw all the good things up.
Yeah, I mean, he lets his message get in the way of a story well told, and that's that's an ultimate sin, I think. Like, you know, sitting down with a theme in mind is probably not the best way to write a script. The themes ought to come out of the story.
Yeah, we get it. You're trying to make a comment on fucking Americans who are, you know, slovenly turds that love to eat shit that they know is bad for them. They sit and scarf down Coca-Cola with full sugar and, you know, put whipped cream on everything. I get it. But, like, that's not an interesting story.
No. And, you know, I don't know. It's an attempt at invasion of the body snatchers that is a little more interesting, I guess, than just spores from space. But I don't know. That movie or any of the remakes of that film are horrifying. Like, it ratchets the tension up like from beginning to end. This one just kind of, you know, it shows all its cards at the very beginning, which is a bad idea, and then doesn't really like have anything closing in on our heroes necessarily. They never seem all that in much danger, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. So what would you give the film out of 5? What would you give The Stuff out of 5?
I'll give it a 2.5, I'll say. Almost a 3. Nah, 2.5. 2.5 is good. It's a worthwhile watch. I don't think you're going to come away feeling insulted at all. And I think you can definitely get through it. It's, there's enough interesting stuff going on the screen, and it is fun ultimately. So, if the comparison is, if you put 3 movies in front of you and 2 of them are Society and Street Trash and the other one's The Stuff, watch The Stuff. Don't watch those others.
Yeah, watch The Stuff because, again, you can watch the cool parts of Street Trash without having to watch the whole movie. And there are cool parts of Street Trash. I mean, there are.
Absolutely.
The toilet scene is gnarly.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
But, at least in the in-between parts, as poorly paced as the film is, like, it's always good to be watching good actors doing their thing. And I don't think Michael Moriarty disappoints. I don't think most of the cast disappoints, except for the kid.
Yeah, no, that is the other thing about this film that is great, is the performances are actually really good. So I walk away from this film with that in mind. But yeah, I give it like a 2.5. It's good, not great. If there's, like you said, if It's Alive is a better Larry Cohen film, I should probably check that one out.
Yeah, and you know what? I think a lot of times we all forget, like, you know, it's fine to be a middling film. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be the best or the worst. Like, this is a good way to pass the time. Your life isn't going to end or begin because of this film, but at the same time, it's a pleasant enough diversion.
I agree 100%. It's a nice way to spend an hour and 25 minutes, but you're not going to get much out of it. So let's take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast.
On this picturesque block, in this manicured home, something evil, something terrifying, something horrifying is haunting Rhino. His mother.
I thought I told you to spray this house. The place is infested with vermin.
Although she was a little strict,
Look at this dust. It's an inch thick.
he never wished her any harm.
You look after me like
Until
your mother's dead, Lionel.
now, whatever Mom's got
Who's your mother?
has caught on with the neighbors.
She's been bitten! You know what that means?
You can pray.
I kick ass for the Lord!
You can plead. You can beg for mercy.
Help! Someone! Please!
But nothing you can do will stop.
There's thousands of them!
Because how do you kill something that's already dead. Trimark Pictures presents a modern masterpiece of horror.
Your mother ate my dog!
Dead Alive.
Party's over.
That's right. On the next CultureCast, we are going to be talking about one of Peter Jackson's finest films. No, I'm not talking about a film that you actually somehow managed to already mention, Mike. We are not talking about Return of the King. We are talking about Brain Dead, otherwise known as Dead Alive. Otherwise known as, God, I wish Peter Jackson still made films like this. Until then, where can people find you, Father Malone?
You can find me, as you mentioned, on my YouTube channel, OughtFive Films, on my show You've Never Seen. Got a brand new episode up there about a absolute classic, The Return of the Living Dead. You can also hear me on the Chronicles from the Crypt podcast, where you and I talk about the HBO television series Tales from the Crypt, not Chronicles of the Crypt. And you can also hear me on Dreams for Sale, the Twilight Zone 85 podcast, where we discuss the late and lamented great revival of the Twilight Zone from the mid-'80s. Started around exactly the same year that this movie came out.
Is that the one with Forrest Whitaker?
Yes.
Have some.
Oh, wait, no.
No, it is not the one with Forrest Whitaker. Thank the Lord above. As always, you can find me on Twitter at casualty_Chris. I do another podcast called The Kolchak Tapes, where I sit and talk Kolchak the Night Stalker with our good friend Mike White. You can find that over at kolchakstapes.com. You can find more of the CultureCast at kulturecast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at CultureCast. We have links to Patreon, iTunes, all that good stuff. You know what to do. You know how I'm begging for money. I don't like doing it. You don't like hearing me do it. So if you want to kick us a couple dollars, cool. If not, I get it. Not the big of a deal. Big thanks, as always, to _91 for Thunderous, the intro outro music for the CultureCast, and we'll catch you on the next episode.